They say grief has 5 stages. I didn't get any of them. Because I wasn't allowed to grieve. Because I didn't die. I disappeared. The morning my wife thought I died in that crash was the first time I felt alive in years. I wasn't supposed to be on that bus. But I was. And it flipped off an icy road in Idaho, killing 17 people. There were no full bodies, just scattered belongings, burned IDs, shattered phones. My wallet, my old wallet with my name in it, was one of the only things recovered from the wreckage. I know. You're wondering, how does someone let people think they're dead? The real question is, what kind of man gets pushed so far that disappearing feels like mercy? My name's Curtis. Not Kurt. Not CJ. Just Curtis. I had a wife named Mallory. That name probably still haunts the back of my teeth when I grind them at night. And 9 years ago, I let her believe I died. She held a funeral. I saw the photos online. She wore navy. She hated black. Said it made people look like crows. Friends posted tributes. My high school math teacher wrote a poem. Even my estranged brother showed up and said I was the best of us. Mallory cried. Oh, she cried. For the cameras, at least. Then, 6 weeks later, she moved a man into our house. 6 weeks. His name was Porter. A personal trainer. With a man bun. The same man I once caught checking her out at a charity 5K. The one she called just a friend from the gym. That friend was sleeping in my bed, wearing my robe, drinking coffee from my world's okayest husband mug, just 46 days after I supposedly died. And she never visited the crash site. Not once. Do you know what it's like to be a ghost watching the woman who said forever delete you like a spam email? I stayed gone. New state. New name. I didn't fake my death. I just never corrected the record. Until this morning. This morning, I was walking past a trendy cafe downtown, just trying to find a quiet place to read, when I heard that laugh. High, sharp, fake. And I saw her, Mallory, laughing with friends, wearing those ridiculous, oversized sunglasses like she was still somebody's influencer wife. She didn't see me. Not at first. But when she did, she froze. 9 years later. And suddenly, the dead man was standing 10 feet away. And I hadn't even said hello yet. Her smile vanished so fast it was almost surgical. One moment she was all teeth and laughter and performative brunch sparkle, and the next, stone. Absolute stillness. Mallory sat there clutching her little porcelain cup like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Her 2 friends were still mid-giggle about something, until they followed her frozen gaze and turned too. I didn't stop walking. I didn't speed up either. I just kept going past the cafe window like a breeze, like some random man on the street. Except I watched her out of the corner of my eye, watched the exact moment she dropped her spoon, how her fingers trembled, how her whole body leaned back like she was bracing for impact. I didn't even break stride, but it was enough. She knew. She knew. I rounded the corner and ducked into the bookstore 2 doors down, heart thundering, not from fear. God, not fear, but from the adrenaline of watching her world crack. I hid behind a shelf of cookbooks, barely breathing, peeking out like some awkward teenage spy. And yes, I'll admit it, I was hoping she'd follow. Hoping she'd chase me like I used to chase her. 3 minutes passed. 5. Nothing. And then, I saw her. Mallory stepped into the store like a raccoon in a kitchen. Skittish. Pale. Trying to act normal, but failing miserably. Her sunglasses were now on her head, and she looked older. Not bad, just weathered. Like she was made of paper that had been folded too many times. She scanned the aisles. I waited. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to see what she'd do. She spotted me. I stood motionless. She didn't speak at first, just walked slowly up the aisle, until we were 5 feet apart, surrounded by cookbooks in silence. Then she whispered, "Curtis?" I tilted my head, pretending to think. That's one of the names I used to go by. She blinked fast. Her lip trembled. "They said you were dead." I said, "Yeah, I read my own obit. It was a little dramatic. You should have edited it better." She looked like she wanted to collapse into the floor. I don't understand. How are you? Where have you?" I cut her off. "No, you don't get questions yet. You already had all the answers you needed when you moved Porter into my house 6 weeks after my funeral." Her face twisted like I slapped her. "That's not fair." I laughed. Loudly. Some teenager browsing near us glanced up. I didn't care. I was done whispering. "Not fair?" I let you think I was dead and still gave you more peace than you gave me when I was alive. She swallowed hard, voice low. I didn't know how to grieve. I was hurting. You weren't easy. Oh, right. Poor Mallory. Mourning widow and victim of the quiet husband who gave her everything and asked for nothing but honesty. She bit her lip. I watched her pupils dart, probably trying to assess if she could spin this, if she could control this narrative like she did everything else. But this time, she had no script. I didn't plan it that way, she said finally. It just happened. You think I care anymore? I said. I didn't come back for you. And I didn't. But in that moment, watching her shrink inside herself like a balloon losing air, I realized something. She still had secrets. Big ones. She looked like she wanted to scream, but didn't know which direction to aim it. You should go back to your friends, I said. Tell them you saw a ghost. And then I walked out. She didn't follow. But I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't that I was afraid. Not of her. Not of what seeing her again might trigger. It was something else. The noise in my brain that wouldn't quiet down. For 9 years I lived like I didn't exist, like I'd been erased, like I was a sketch someone smudged off the page. And then in one afternoon, her eyes had put me right back into focus, her focus. And that lit something inside me I thought I'd buried forever. Around 2:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't recognize it. Of course not. I hadn't had contact with anyone from that life in nearly a decade. But I knew. Even before I opened it, I knew it would be her. The message was short. Was it really you? No name. No punctuation. Like she was scared to write the full sentence, scared it would confirm something she couldn't undo. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I typed back. Was it really you 9 years ago? No reply. And yet I sat there holding the phone like it might grow teeth and bite me. At 3:09 a.m., a second message came in. Longer this time. You don't understand what happened. There are things you never knew. Things I couldn't tell anyone. Please, if you ever cared about me, I need to explain. I should have deleted it. I should have blocked the number. But curiosity is a cruel thing. It doesn't whisper, it claws. So I replied. 1 hour. Neutral ground. Public. No excuses. If you're late, I'm gone. We met at an old train station cafe on the edge of the city, one that had been half converted into a bookstore and had terrible coffee, but decent waffles. I picked the place because I figured if she tried anything weird, like recording me or pulling some kind of manipulative act, at least I'd be surrounded by pensioners and loud cappuccino machines. She walked in exactly on time, wearing a gray coat and sunglasses, like she was preparing to be seen but not recognized. She sat across from me. No hug, no smile, just trembling fingers wrapped around a chipped mug. Thank you for meeting me, she said. Her voice was small, unfamiliar. She used to speak like the world owed her space. Now she barely took up any. You've got 10 minutes, I said flatly. She looked around, leaned in slightly, then whispered, Porter wasn't just some guy. I laughed once, humorless. He was a trainer with too much cologne and exactly one brain cell. That about cover it? She shook her head. No, I didn't meet him after your funeral. I met him before. I froze. She kept talking. He worked for someone. Not at a gym. He wasn't a trainer. That was a lie. Everything was a lie. What the hell are you saying, Mallory? I said slowly. She swallowed hard. Curtis, the accident wasn't an accident. You were supposed to be on that bus. Chills ran through my back like a faucet turned to ice. My hands clenched under the table. I was on that bus. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Then how are you alive? No, I said. Why was I supposed to be on that bus? Her eyes darted again. Because someone wanted to make sure you never came back. I leaned in, voice sharp. Who? She looked like she was about to answer, but her gaze snapped past my shoulder. Her entire face changed. Panic. Absolute panic. I turned. A man stood by the door. Tall. Bald. Dark green jacket. Familiar posture. Mallory's lips parted, but no sound came out. I turned back to her. But she was gone. Just like before. The man in the green jacket didn't follow her. That's what shook me the most. He just stood at the cafe entrance like he was there to confirm something, then slowly backed out through the same door she vanished through, disappearing into the light morning drizzle like a shadow that never should have existed in daylight. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor behind me. The few patrons in the cafe barely looked up. To them, I was just another guy chasing a woman who didn't want to be caught. But to me, I was a dead man watching his old life unravel in reverse. I ran out the door and looked both ways, but she was already gone. No sign of the green jacket either. Just street noise, blinking crosswalks, and the sudden choking realization that Mallory hadn't come to explain anything. She came to warn me. Back in my apartment, I paced like a caged animal. I hadn't felt this unsettled since the days right after the accident. Back when I lived in that motel off the highway eating vending machine Pop-Tarts and watching the news for signs they'd identified my body. Back when I thought disappearing was the only way to survive. And now, she shows up 9 years later, tells me I wasn't just collateral damage, I was the target, and then runs off like some scene from a thriller I never wanted to star in. I knew what I had to do. I pulled out the one thing I hadn't touched in almost a decade. A tiny metal lockbox hidden in the back of my closet behind a shoebox full of receipts and a pile of unmatched socks. Inside, the only physical remains of my old life. A few photos, a USB drive, the last paycheck I received before the accident, and a key. That key belonged to a storage unit I hadn't visited since the week I disappeared. I had dumped everything there. Old journals, marriage documents, even the CCTV drive from our apartment building that I took the day before the crash. Don't ask me why I grabbed it. Maybe I already knew something didn't feel right back then. Maybe the part of me that still trusted her was smaller than I thought. The drive was dusty, the label almost faded. But I plugged it into my laptop and began skimming through the folders. One video file caught my eye. March_18_ late night hallway. The night before the bus crash. I hit play. The footage was black and white, grainy. The hallway outside our apartment. Empty at first. Then, movement. Mallory. 2:47 a.m. She was wearing her robe, barefoot, talking on the phone. Her voice was low, but the hallway mic picked up a few words. He's still going. Idaho. Yeah. No, he doesn't suspect anything. My blood turned cold. A second figure stepped into frame. Porter. Smirking. Holding a backpack. She handed him something. It looked like my wallet. And then, her words. Make sure it gets found. Not him. I paused the video, heart hammering so hard it echoed in my ears. What the hell had I just seen? I'd spent years thinking I'd left her. But this wasn't abandonment. This wasn't betrayal. This was a setup. She hadn't just moved on with Porter. They'd conspired together. To erase me. And possibly to kill me. I stared at the paused frame, Porter's smirk frozen in time, Mallory mid-whisper, and I realized I had never really understood what I walked away from. But I was going to find out. If they had planned to bury me, they should have dug deeper. I didn't sleep again. Instead, I sat on my floor, back against the wall, replaying that hallway video on a loop until the timestamp burned into my eyes like a branding iron. March 18th, 2:47 a.m. One day before the crash. One day before I died. Every frame was a new blade, cutting through the old narrative I had convinced myself to believe for nearly a decade. The two people I trusted most, my wife and the man who smiled at me while stealing my life, were planning something. Something that didn't just hurt. Something that intended to erase me. But here's the part that really broke me. Mallory looked calm. Not conflicted. Not shaken. Calm. Like betrayal was a language she spoke fluently, and this was just another quiet sentence. I needed more. I needed answers. And I knew exactly where to start. There was one name I'd never said out loud since the crash. One man I thought I'd never speak to again. His name was Ashford Lane, my former boss. Back when I worked for Vireo Logistics, a quiet little tech firm that liked to play big on paper, but mostly just stored sensitive inventory for corporate clients. Servers, rare metals, data backups. A lot of it behind locked doors I never had keys to. Ashford wasn't the type of man you called casually. He was polished in the way expensive lawyers are, always with a fresh shave and a silver watch he checked more often than necessary. I used to think he was just a CEO who liked control. But after that video, after what Mallory whispered to Porter, I started to think Ashford wasn't just in the background. I started to think maybe he was in the foundation. So I dialed the last number I had for him, an old business card I'd saved and tucked into that storage box, long faded, but still intact. I didn't expect anyone to answer. I was ready for it to be disconnected, or worse, picked up by some cold-voiced assistant telling me Mr. Lane was unavailable. But after 2 rings, a voice clicked in. Hello. I froze. It was him. Older. Sharper. Still with that same unnerving calm. Mr. Lane? I asked slowly. Silence on the other end. A long one. Then, I assumed you were dead, Curtis. You weren't alone, I replied. Is that a threat? He asked, almost bored. No, not yet. He sighed like I was interrupting his espresso. What do you want? Information, I said. About March 18th, 2016. About what happened at Vireo, and why someone would have wanted me on that bus. Another pause. Then, something new crept into his voice, amusement. You think this is about you? I clenched my fist around the phone. Mallory and Porter worked for someone. She gave him my wallet the night before the crash. You were my only point of contact that week. Someone wanted me gone. You're going to tell me who? A click. Then silence. I thought he'd hung up. But then he said one thing. Just one. Ask her about Hollow Glen. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, stunned. That name, Hollow Glen, didn't mean anything to me. But the way he said it, I knew it would. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. Nothing popped up at first. Just wilderness trails, camping sites. But then I found it. A decommissioned research facility, privately owned, closed since 2013. Vireo Logistics had been one of the contractors that managed its digital infrastructure. My old company. Ashford's name was on the license renewals. And then I saw a news article buried 6 pages deep in search results. 2013, Hollow Glen facility fire. No survivors confirmed. Cause undetermined. There was a photo of the site. Blackened trees. Twisted steel. And in the corner, mostly obscured by smoke, was a woman running from the wreckage. I zoomed in. It wasn't clear. Not at first. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became. It was her. It was Mallory. 2 years before we met. She never told me she worked there. She never told me any of this. And now I understood something I hadn't before. I wasn't just married to a liar. I was married to someone who had already survived a cover-up. And she was damn good at it. By the time the sun rose, I was no longer just a man trying to make sense of a ruined marriage. I was a man walking through the ashes of someone else's secrets, and I didn't know where it would lead. I'd barely slept. Not that sleep was possible after what I saw, but something in me had shifted. Something hard and cold had taken root in my gut. I couldn't stop until I understood what really happened at Hollow Glen. And more importantly, what Mallory had to do with it. I found the address through a deep dive on old land registries. The Hollow Glen facility wasn't on any current maps. It had been sold twice, rezoned once, and legally dissolved under 3 different shell companies. All roads leading to it were supposedly blocked due to environmental hazards. Translation? Someone wanted it buried. But I didn't care. I needed to see it. The drive took me 4 hours and 3 wrong turns. I ditched my car at a forestry gate where the paved road turned to dirt, then hiked another mile until I reached a rusted fence with a private property sign half swallowed by weeds. Beyond it was a graveyard of steel, collapsed buildings, overgrown paths, a broken tower that leaned like a drunk. Everything was charred, skeletal, dead, except for the silence. The silence was too clean. I ducked under the fence and moved through the wreckage. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a record, maybe a file. Maybe proof Mallory had been here. Proof that she lied to me years before she ever said, I do. But what I found wasn't what I expected. Inside the main structure, or what was left of it, was a narrow stairwell leading underground. I had to pry the door open with a metal pole and nearly dislocated my shoulder doing it. But when it gave, the air that hit my face was sharp, damp, untouched. The kind of cold that clung to the bones. I flicked on my flashlight and stepped into the dark. The corridor below was lined with scorched tiles and walls that once held wiring. At the far end, I found what looked like a data room. Racks melted, servers half buried under ceiling debris. But one locker, just one, was intact. Bent, but closed. I pulled at the handle until the latch snapped. Inside was a sealed case marked Glen, 14, restricted access. I opened it. Inside were papers, scans of ID cards, old project memos, and one photograph that nearly stopped my heart. Mallory, younger, hair tied back, wearing a facility badge and holding a clipboard. She wasn't a visitor. She was staff. I read the name on the ID card, Dr. M. Roth. Not Mallory Hayes. Not her married name. Not even her maiden name. Roth. She wasn't just working there. She was someone else entirely. Beneath that photo, buried in the files, was a report titled Containment Protocol Deviation, Subject 6B. The language was dense, technical, full of redactions, but the parts that were visible chilled me more than the fire-scarred walls around me. Emergency suppression failed. Individual exhibited acute psychogenic response to memory fragmentation trials. Dr. Roth recommended permanent asset termination. Incident escalated. I sat back on the floor, stunned. I didn't understand half of it, but I understood this much. Something dangerous happened here. Something they couldn't contain. And Mallory, or Dr. Roth, had a direct hand in it. Whatever Subject 6B was, she tried to terminate it. Something went wrong. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up, and she walked away from it without a scratch. She started a new life. A new name. A clean slate. Me. I wasn't a husband. I was a shield. A disguise. A restart button. But maybe I was more than that. Maybe I was part of Hollow Glen, and I didn't even know it. Was that why someone wanted me on that bus? Because I'd seen something? Heard something? Or worse, because I wasn't just a victim? I packed the files and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe until I was back in my car with the doors locked. As I pulled onto the road, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One word. Stop. I threw the phone into the passenger seat and hit the gas. It was too late to stop, because now I didn't just want answers. I wanted to know who the hell I really was. I drove for hours without stopping, the roads blending into a blur of headlights and exit signs. I didn't even know where I was going, only that I needed distance. From Hollow Glen, from the files in my backpack, from the voice in my head whispering questions I didn't have the strength to answer. Was Mallory even her real name? Was Curtis even mine? I pulled into a cheap motel off I-90 around 3 a.m., paid cash, and locked the door behind me twice. The silence inside was thick, broken only by the hum of the broken mini-fridge and the occasional rattle of a passing truck. I dumped the contents of the case on the bed and started reading again, this time slower, methodical, like I was digging up my own grave with a highlighter. There were references scattered through the documents to something called phase recode, a cognitive trial linked to post-trauma identity redirection. It sounded like science fiction or torture. Subjects were described as pliable, fragmented, ideal for conditioning. One phrase appeared more than once. Use of partner anchors to reinforce control schema. Partner anchors. Marriage. Love. Was that what Mallory was to me? Or what I was to her? I should have stopped reading. I should have burned everything and vanished again. But curiosity has teeth, and that night it sank them deep. At the bottom of the file folder was a plain envelope. No markings. Inside was a single photograph, crumpled, as if someone had tried to throw it away but couldn't. It was me. Or at least someone who looked like me. Hair shorter. Thinner. Eyes duller. Standing in a white hallway I didn't recognize, wearing what looked like a medical gown. No smile. Just a distant, empty stare, like someone had wiped him clean. On the back of the photo, scrawled in fading ink, were 3 words, "Before you woke." My lungs froze. I slammed the photo face down and backed away from the bed like it might catch fire. I sat on the floor, gripping the edge of the mattress, trying to remember something. Anything, from before I met Mallory. But the truth hit me like a slow-moving avalanche. I couldn't. Not really. Not clearly. I could recall facts, sure, birthdays, addresses, the name of my favorite teacher in 3rd grade. But when I tried to remember the sound of my mother's voice, the smell of my childhood home, the shape of my life before her, it was like trying to tune in to a static-filled radio. Faint images, uncertain timelines, details that shifted when I focused too hard. I had always chalked that up to trauma, to depression, to survival mode. I told myself that people who vanish don't hold on to everything, that it was normal to lose pieces when you go into hiding. But what if I didn't lose them? What if they were taken? The next morning, I drove to the only place I had left that felt even remotely real, the old diner where Mallory and I used to eat on Sundays. I hadn't been back since I died. The booths were still vinyl. The waitresses still called everyone Han. I sat in the far corner and watched the door. And then, as if summoned by the weight of everything I now knew, she walked in. Mallory. Or Roth. Or whatever her name really was. No disguise. No sunglasses. Just her. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in days. When she spotted me, she didn't flinch. She walked straight to my booth and sat across from me like we were just two old friends catching up after a bad breakup. "I was hoping you'd stop digging," she said quietly. "I was hoping you'd be someone else," I replied. She nodded slowly. "I didn't come to lie this time." "Then don't," I said. "Tell me the truth. All of it." She looked out the window for a long moment, then back at me with eyes that didn't blink. "You weren't supposed to remember any of it," she said. "Not Hollow Glen. Not before. Not even me." "What was I, Mallory?" My voice cracked. "Some experiment?" Her answer wasn't immediate. Then, with a sigh that sounded like it came from someone much older than her 30-something frame, she whispered, "You were the only one who survived phase record. And that made you dangerous." I stared at her, speechless. "And that bus?" I asked. "Was that supposed to finish the job?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned forward and said something that nearly broke whatever part of me was still holding on. "You don't know who you were before me. But I do. And you wouldn't like him." I stared at her for a long time after she said that. "You wouldn't like who you were." It was a clean little sentence, like a scalpel, meant to cut just deep enough to make me bleed doubt about myself, about what I remembered, about what I was allowed to know. She said it so calmly, like she was doing me a kindness, as if all the years of manipulation, surveillance, and erasure were just a necessary evil. But the thing was, she didn't scare me anymore. "You keep saying was," I finally said. "Like that person is still buried inside me." She hesitated, then nodded. "He is. But quiet now. Sleeping." I leaned forward. "Then let him sleep." She blinked. "I don't care who I was," I continued. "Not anymore. Whoever that man was, whether he was cruel, broken, dangerous, he died the moment I stepped off that bus. And maybe that was the best thing that ever happened to me." Mallory looked shaken for the first time. She had expected a fight, a collapse, a cry for answers, but not peace. She never expected peace. "I didn't want to love you," she whispered, voice cracking. "But I did. And that's why I panicked. That's why I made the wrong choice." "You didn't panic," I said. "You planned. You manipulated. You played God. And then you tried to bury me when I no longer fit the project." She said nothing. She didn't need to. "I'm done digging," I said. "I don't need to know what Hollow Glen was. I don't need to know what name I used before. I don't need revenge. I just want to live a life that I build with my own hands. No shadows. No ghosts." I stood up and slid a flash drive across the table. "All the files. Everything I found. I'm giving them back to you. Because I don't want to carry this anymore." She looked at it like it was made of fire. "What if they come for you again?" she asked. "Then let them," I said. "I'll be ready this time. And I won't run." I walked out of that diner without looking back. For once, I didn't need to. There was nothing behind me worth turning around for. I drove for hours in silence, this time not to escape, but to move forward. I crossed state lines, rented a cabin near the coast, changed my number, burned the rest of the documents. And then, slowly, I started living. I adopted a dog, learned to fish, took up woodworking, started writing again, not about her, or the past, or memory manipulation. Just stories. Simple ones. Stories where people lose everything and still survive. Weeks later, I got a letter. No return address. No signature. Just a card with one line written in perfect handwriting. "Curtis is a good name. Keep it." I burned it without reading it twice. And for the first time in 9 years, I slept through the night. Mallory, or Roth, or whoever she truly was, would carry her shadows. I didn't need to carry mine anymore. They tried to erase me. They tried to rewrite me. But I chose who I am. And that was the end of their story, not mine.